I never thought the word home could feel heavier than a prison door until I stepped back into my father's house with a single suitcase and a lie I didn't plan to keep forever. To them, I was just Ayla, the broke relative who had failed in life. To me, this house was where everything had started and where everything had broken. My father barely looked up from his phone when I arrived. "You'll stay in the back room," he said, not even bothering to ask how I was. "Don't expect comfort. You'll earn your place here." Earn it. Those words still echo in my chest. My stepmother, Liana, smiled the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "We're not running a charity," she added sweetly. "If you want to live here, you help out. Cleaning, cooking, babysitting, all of it." I nodded. What else could I do? My half-siblings stared at me like I was invisible, or worse, like I was disposable. By the second morning, my role was clear. I woke up before sunrise to scrub floors that already shined. I washed dishes from dinners I was never invited to sit at. I ironed clothes for people who wouldn't even say thank you. When guests came over, I was told to disappear. "Maids don't sit with family," my stepmother whispered once, loud enough for everyone to hear. And no one corrected her. Not my father, not my siblings, not a single person who shared my blood. They didn't know that every insult slid off me like rain, because while they thought I had come crawling back with nothing, I had come with everything. I had changed my last name. I wore simple clothes on purpose. I let my hands smell like detergent instead of perfume. They never asked where I'd been for the past 5 years. If they had, they might have learned the truth, but arrogance makes people blind. One afternoon, as I knelt on the kitchen floor wiping dried juice, my stepbrother leaned against the counter and laughed. "You know," he said, "some people are just born to serve." I looked up at him. I wanted to laugh, because the company logo stitched into the cleaning apron I wore, something I had chosen myself, was mine. They just didn't recognize it yet. That night, I overheard my father arguing on the phone. "The board meeting is in 3 days, he snapped. "If this new CEO doesn't approve the merger, we're finished." My heart slowed. 3 days. The same 3 days I had returned to this house. I stood silently in the hallway, holding a laundry basket, listening to him panic over a company he thought he controlled, a company he believed he built, a company he stole from my late mother. I went to bed that night on a thin mattress in the storage room, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying every humiliation of the day. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was surviving. They had no idea I was waiting. Because when that boardroom door opened, they wouldn't see a maid. They would see the woman who owned everything they stood on. And the first betrayal was about to come full circle. What they didn't know was that my stepmother had already signed her own downfall using my name, and in part 2, I discover the secret document that proves my family never planned to let me leave this house alive.
I learned the truth by accident. That's the cruel part. After everything, it wasn't a confession or a fight that revealed their betrayal. It was a single sheet of paper, folded carelessly and forgotten on the dining table, like my existence always had been. I was dusting the shelves when I saw it. My name. Not the one they called me every day with annoyance in their voices, but my full legal name, written neatly at the top of a document stamped with a law firm's seal. My hands froze. I knew that seal. I had approved its redesign myself 6 months ago. My heart began to pound as I unfolded the paper. It was a power of attorney, temporary, they claimed, signed by my father and stepmother. It stated that I had voluntarily agreed to hand over any present or future financial claims to them in exchange for room, board, and family support. Room, board, slavery wrapped in legal language. The signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It was a forgery. I sat down slowly, the room spinning, memories crashing into me all at once. My mother's voice, her warnings, her quiet fear of this house and the people in it. She wanted you small, my stepmother used to say with a laugh. Good thing we fixed that. Fixed. I read the document again, my chest burning. They hadn't just wanted free labor, they wanted control. If I ever revealed who I really was, this paper would magically appear to prove I'd signed everything away. I wasn't family. I was an asset, a disposable one. That night at dinner, I watched them differently. My father complained about his company's falling stock like the world owed him sympathy. My stepmother criticized the food I cooked while eating seconds. My siblings argued over money that wasn't even theirs yet. None of them noticed how quiet I was. "How long are you planning to stay?" my stepmother asked casually, cutting into her steak. I smiled politely. "Not long." She laughed. "Good, this arrangement isn't permanent." Neither was hers. Later, as I washed dishes, I heard my father speaking in the living room. "If the new CEO blocks the restructuring, we'll lose everything," he said. "But I heard she's young, emotional, easy to manipulate." I almost dropped a plate. "She?" my stepmother scoffed. "Women like that are always soft. We'll charm her." I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. Soft? I thought about the nights I slept in my office after closing billion-dollar negotiations, the investors I outmaneuvered twice my age, the board members who went silent when I spoke. Soft wasn't the word. But then he said something that changed everything. "We'll be fine," my father continued. "Worst case, we sell the house and move. Ayla won't be a problem. She has nowhere to go." I clenched the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles turned white. They weren't just using me. They were planning to discard me. That night, I emailed my legal team from a burner phone. "Prepare the boardroom. No delays. I want everyone present." Then I slipped the forged document into my bag. Evidence. The next morning, my stepmother tossed me a rag and pointed at the stairs. "Scrub every step. We're expecting guests." Guests. I knelt and started cleaning like always, my head bowed, my hair falling into my face. But inside, I was counting hours, because the board meeting wasn't just about the company. It was about the moment my family would finally learn the truth. And when they did, this house would never feel like power again. What I didn't expect was my father announcing he'd invited the new CEO to dinner right here in this house. And in part 3, I'm forced to serve the table where my own identity is about to be exposed.
The first thing my stepmother did after hanging up the phone was scream my name. "Ayla!" I came running from the laundry room, hands still damp, heart already bracing for impact. "We're having an important guest tonight," she announced, smoothing her hair in the hallway mirror. "A very powerful woman, the new CEO." I kept my face blank. "I understand." she continued. You will serve, and most importantly, you will stay invisible. My father adjusted his tie, his voice sharp. This meeting could save everything. One mistake, and we're finished. Finished. If only he knew. That evening, the house transformed. Candles, polished silverware, wine bottles older than my stepbrother's ego. They wore their best clothes, practiced smiles in mirrors, rehearsed compliments meant for someone they assumed would never be me. I wore the same plain dress I always did. I set the table with steady hands, placing forks and knives with the precision I'd learned in boardrooms, not kitchens. No one noticed. At 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. My stepmother froze. Ayla, kitchen, now. I stepped back just as the front door opened. I heard heels, confident ones. A woman's voice followed, calm, controlled. Good evening. I recognized it instantly. My own. A pause. Then my father laughed nervously. Welcome, please come in. I stayed hidden, heart racing, not from fear, but anticipation. This was my proxy, my chief of staff, the only person in the world who knew the full truth of my plan. Dinner began without me at the table. I served silently, placing plates in front of them, pouring wine, stepping back into the shadows as instructed. They spoke freely in front of me. She seems young, my stepmother whispered, not knowing I could hear her perfectly. Young doesn't mean foolish, the woman replied smoothly. I almost smiled. At one point, my stepbrother snapped his fingers at me. More water. I poured it, slowly, carefully. My father leaned forward. We've been loyal to this company for decades, he said, voice heavy with entitlement. We expect that loyalty to be recognized. The woman met his gaze. Loyalty goes both ways. Something in her tone made him shift uncomfortably. Midway through dinner, my stepmother gestured toward me dismissively. Don't mind her, just help. Just help. The woman's eyes flicked to me. For half a second, something unreadable passed between us. Recognition. Respect. I cleared the plates, then placed a slim black folder beside the woman's plate. She opened it. The room went quiet. This document, she said calmly, suggests your family attempted to forge a power of attorney under my employer's name. My father stiffened. That's impossible. Is it? She asked, sliding the paper across the table. My stepmother went pale. My father's voice trembled. This must be a misunderstanding. The woman closed the folder and stood. Tomorrow morning, the board will address this. All of it. She turned toward the door, then paused. And Ayla, she added casually. Every head snapped in my direction. Yes, I answered, meeting their eyes for the first time that night. Make sure you rest. Tomorrow will be a long day for everyone. The door closed behind her. Silence filled the room like smoke. My stepmother's voice cracked. What was that about? I picked up the empty plates. "You should get some sleep," I said softly. "Tomorrow changes things." I walked back to my room, my heart steady, my mind sharp. They still didn't know, but now they were afraid. By morning, my father would try to destroy my reputation before the board met. And in part 4, I discover he's willing to sacrifice me completely to save himself.
I woke before sunrise to shouting. My name was being thrown around the house like a weapon. "Ayla is unstable," my father's voice roared from the living room. "She's been lying to us since the day she came back." I stayed still, listening through the thin walls. My stepmother chimed in, panic sharp in her tone. "What if she's working with the CEO? What if she's been spying on us?" Spying. If only they knew how small that word was compared to the truth. I dressed quietly, choosing neutral clothes, nothing that hinted at power. I needed them reckless, not cautious. When I stepped into the kitchen, my father turned on me instantly. "Sit," he commanded. I did. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was an email draft, addressed to the board. "She's mentally unstable," he read aloud. "A disgruntled relative with delusions of importance, claims to have influence she doesn't possess." I looked at him calmly. "You're lying." His jaw tightened. "I'm protecting my family." I laughed softly. "You mean yourself." My stepmother crossed her arms. "You should be grateful we took you in. Without us, you're nothing." Nothing. I remembered sleeping in my car at 22, building my first startup with borrowed Wi-Fi and borrowed faith. I remembered choosing integrity when shortcuts were offered. I remembered my mother teaching me silence could be a weapon. I stood. "Send the email." They blinked. "What?" my father snapped. "Send it," I repeated. "Tell them everything you think about me. Because lies fall apart fastest under light." He hesitated, then hit send. That was the moment he sealed his own end. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. Board acknowledgement received. Full inquiry initiated. I slipped the phone back into my pocket as my stepmother paced the room. "They'll believe us," she muttered. "They have to." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When my father left for the office, he didn't look back. "Clean the house," my stepmother ordered, her voice brittle. "I don't want it looking like a disaster when we come back." When? I scrubbed floors one last time, not because I had to, but because I wanted my ending spotless. By noon, my father called. I heard every word from the hallway. "They want her there," he said, confused. "The board asked specifically for Ayla." My stepmother's face drained of color. I stepped into the doorway. "They've been asking for me for a long time," I said gently. She stared at me. "What did you do?" I smiled. "I stopped being quiet." The car arrived an hour later, a black sedan, the kind they used for executives. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and nodded at me respectfully. "Miss Ayla, they're ready." My father's voice shook over the phone. "Ready for what?" I picked up my bag. For the truth. As I walked out, my stepmother collapsed onto the couch. The house behind me felt smaller than it ever had. And for the first time, I wasn't leaving as their maid. What my family didn't know was that the board already had proof of the stolen company, proof my mother died trying to protect. And in part 5, I walk into the boardroom where my father finally recognizes who I am.
The boardroom smelled like polished wood and fear. I recognized both. When the elevator doors opened, Every conversation inside went quiet. 12 board members sat around the long glass table, people who had watched me grow this company from the shadows, who had trusted me with decisions that shaped thousands of lives. At the far end of the room stood my father. He was sweating. His confident posture from the house was gone, replaced by rigid shoulders and restless hands. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy arguing. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "You can't ambush me like this." The chairwoman spoke calmly. "You were invited. So was Ayla." His head turned. Our eyes met. For the first time in years, he actually looked at me, not as help, not as a burden, not as a problem to manage, but as a threat. "You?" he whispered. I stepped forward, heels clicking softly against the floor. Each step felt like reclaiming something he had taken from me, piece by piece. "Yes," I said. "Me." My chief of staff stood and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, before today's vote, the CEO has requested this meeting to address matters of ownership, fraud, and identity." My father laughed, a short, broken sound. "This is a joke. She's nobody." I placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents my mother had hidden before she died, proof of original ownership, signatures, transfer records altered after her passing, years of theft neatly exposed. "She was somebody," I said quietly, "and she trusted you." The room filled with murmurs. The chairwoman reviewed the papers slowly. "These records show that the company was never legally yours." My father's face drained of color. "That's impossible." "No. What's impossible is how long you got away with it." He turned to me, voice cracking. "I did it for the family." I met his gaze. "You did it to the family." My stepmother burst into the room then, breathless, eyes wild. "Stop this!" she screamed. "You're destroying us!" I looked at her calmly. "You did that when you forged my name." Security stepped closer. The vote happened quickly. Unanimous. My father was removed from all positions effective immediately. An investigation would follow. Legal consequences were inevitable. As they escorted him out, he turned back once more. "You could have told me. You could have spared us." I shook my head. "You had years to see me. You chose not to." When the doors closed behind him, the room exhaled. The chairwoman smiled at me. "Miss Ayla, the floor is yours." I sat at the head of the table, not as revenge, as responsibility. But as the meeting ended, my phone buzzed. A message from my stepmother. "You think this is over? You still live in our house." I looked out at the city skyline, unbothered, because they still didn't know. I had already taken care of that. That evening, my family returns home to discover they no longer own the house or anything inside it. And in part 6, the final betrayal turns into their final eviction.
I arrived at the house just after sunset. The same house where I had scrubbed floors on my knees. The same hallway where I'd learned how quietly a person could disappear. Only this time, the lights were already on, and the locks were new. I stepped inside slowly, my heels echoing through the entryway. Everything looked the same: furniture, walls, framed family photos that never included me. But the air felt different. It smelled like endings. My stepmother stormed toward me the moment she saw me. "What did you do?" she demanded, voice cracking. "Why won't the security code work?" I set my bag down carefully. "Because it's not yours anymore." My father stood frozen behind her, tie loosened, eyes sunken. He looked older, smaller. "You can't do this," he said. "This is my house." I met his gaze without anger. It was my mother's. Silence swallowed the room. I walked to the living room shelf and picked up a framed photo of my mother, the only one that had survived years in storage. "She bought this house before you ever set foot in it. She put it in a trust you never bothered to read." My stepmother laughed hysterically. "You're lying." I handed her the documents. She stopped laughing. "Effective this morning," I said, "the trust reverted to its original beneficiary, me." My father sank into a chair. "Why now?" I took a breath. "Because power without accountability turns people cruel." They stared at me like strangers. "I never wanted this. I wanted a family." My stepmother's voice sharpened. "So this is revenge?" I shook my head. "This is closure." A knock came at the door. 2 officers, a locksmith. "Miss Ayla," one of them said respectfully, "we're here to ensure a peaceful transition." My stepbrother ran down the stairs. "What's going on?" My stepmother grabbed his arm. "They're throwing us out." I corrected her gently. "I'm reclaiming what was stolen." They had 30 minutes. 30 minutes to pack years of entitlement into boxes. I stood in the doorway of my old storage room while they rushed around the house in panic. My father approached me quietly. "You failed you." I studied his face. "You failed yourself first." When they finally left, the house fell silent. I locked the door behind them. For the first time in my life, the house felt like mine. But my phone vibrated again. A new message. "This isn't finished. You forgot one thing." Attached was a photo, a document. My name, my inheritance, altered, forged, again. I closed my eyes slowly. They hadn't learned, and that meant I wasn't done teaching. In the final part, I confront the last lie my family left behind and make a choice that will decide whether I become like them or finally break the cycle forever. I didn't sleep that night. The forged document glowed on my phone screen like a challenge. Same tactics, same desperation. Same belief that if they lied hard enough, reality would bend for them. It never had. By morning, my legal team confirmed what I already suspected. The document was fake, sloppy, rushed, signed in panic. But what struck me wasn't the fraud, it was the message attached. You forgot one thing. They still believed I was playing their game. I requested one final meeting, neutral ground, a mediator, lawyers present, everything recorded. They arrived late. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My stepmother wore anger like armor. My siblings looked confused, collateral damage of choices they never questioned. The mediator slid the forged document across the table. This will not hold up in court. My stepmother snapped. Then why are we here? I folded my hands calmly. Because I am offering you something you don't deserve. They stared. I could press charges, I continued. Fraud, forgery, abuse of trust. You would lose everything. Again. My father finally spoke. Then do it. I studied him. The man who taught me fear before he taught me love. I won't, I said. Shock rippled across the table. Not because you're innocent, I added, but because I refuse to become you. I slid a new document forward, a settlement. No house, no company, no control, but enough to start over, far away from me. My stepmother scoffed. And if we refuse? I met her gaze steadily. Then the evidence goes public, and so does what you did to my mother. Her face collapsed. They signed, one by one. As they stood to leave, my father paused. Do you hate me? I answered honestly. I stopped needing you. That was worse. Weeks later, I stood alone in the house, sunlight pouring through clean windows. I donated the furniture, sold the property, closed the chapter. The company thrived under transparency. And me? I stopped hiding. Not as a maid, not as a secret, not as someone waiting to be seen. I was always the CEO. They just never believed someone they tried to break could rise above them. But I did. And I walked away, free.